Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming and hanging out. I am going to be working on inking Age of Night, chapter 23, page 2. This is the one that I was drawing last week, if you joined me then. I didn't bother masking any of the word balloons this time because it's kind of one of those pages where there's not really anything super spoilery or plot-centric happening, so. Not every page is going to have a ton of stuff on it. So as you can see, I finished drawing it. I did the lettering. I already did some inking, got some inking started with tools. So I went in and used anywhere that I had to use my straight edge or my French curve. I already went in and did that because I was already using them on some other pages and some other work that I had been working on the last couple of days. So it just made sense to work on it all at the same time. I've found it's a lot more efficient for me to work on these pages and these pieces in batches. So like I'll draw a whole bunch of pages at once and get in a really nice groove drawing. And then I'll go through and I'll ink a whole bunch of pages at once, which is nice because especially when you're doing stuff like with the tools, you can do one section with the tools and wait for it to dry and then move on to another page and work on that one with the tools while the first one is drying. And then by the time you come back, the section that you worked on is dry already and you don't have to worry about like smearing your tool through it, making a mess. So I've just found also in working in batches of pages and illustrations that it's a lot easier to get into a groove and get a lot more productivity out than if you're just working on one thing and you're like, oh, well, but I'm done drawing now, so now I have to totally switch gears and go into inking on this one piece. Maybe that won't take me very long, but now I still have a little bit of time left, but not enough to do the next stage. And, I've just found that it actually works out a lot better than trying to switch gears on one piece multiple times. Do a whole bunch of them. All right. And if you're hanging out, always feel free to say hi in the comments or leave me a comment or a question. I try to answer questions if I get any of them. I may not respond right away, but I am periodically looking up and checking the chat to see if anyone is making any questions or comments or anything. This nib is like nearing the end of its days. It's not giving me a very consistent line anymore. I think I've been using this one for about a year. It's getting a little gunky. Have to stop and rinse it off periodically, but even rinsing it off, you can see it's gotten kind of gross. All right, where do I want to start on this one? Let's start back here on this carving on the wall. Just check my other page. Yeah, that's mostly right. I forgot a line there. Oh, hey, it's Philip. He only gets a month or two out of his, Philip, I would dare say you're probably way more productive than I am. You're probably logging a lot more hours on your nibs than I am in that time. So I see how much you do on Instagram. It's maybe some combination thereof of the mileage and the treatment. So. So that's a fellow comic artist in the comments, Philip Clay. You guys should check him out on Instagram as Darkline Sparrowline. His work is so good, and I can't wait for him to be done with his graphic novel because I want to read it. It looks so good. Lots of little dots. Every time I start drawing a scene in this temple, like the High Temple of Nura, this whole temple complex, I'm like, oh, what did I do for texture in this for this building or this room or whatever? It's all dots. Everything's made out of stone. It's all dots. It's all little tiny dots because I hate myself. That's not true. It's just because I thought it looked good, and it does look good, but then I have to do it a million more times, and that's not fun. So I'm just going to put down this little like layer of tiny dots everywhere to get the texture for the stone, and then I'll go back in and add some shading to it with just some hatching lines. But first, we need all the little dots for texture. I see there are more comments. I will check them in a second when probably next time I need to get up and get ink. Which might be a while because you don't use much of it making tiny little dots. Another little architectural detail. This little circle motif. It's the Temple of the Moon, so everything is little circle motifs. That's just how they do here. All right, let me see it. A million times, yes, exactly. A million times. A million tiny little dots. Just takes so long. It does come out looking nice. It just takes a really long time. Also, that's going to be black. It's nighttime outside. That window is just going to be dark. There's no glass in it or anything, so it's just dark. If these moon carvings were more to the forefront of this particular piece, I would actually break out the ellipse template and try to make sure they were nice and perfectly even and everything, but they're kind of just supposed to be in the background. They're not supposed to have a lot of attention drawn to them, so I actually don't want to make them too perfect because that would kind of make them stand out more. So don't really want anything in the background to be fighting for attention with the stuff going on in the foreground. I want to be very careful with this kind of starburst here, not to make it too heavy or even too defined at all, because again, I don't want your eye to be like staring over there when there's actually important things going on over here. Which I think will be less of an issue once this is scanned in and you can't see the blue lines anymore. Oh, I just realized where I messed up. There's no baseboard on this side of the... Oh, whoops. Here, I'm just going to toss that in there. Oopsie. Quick rinse of my nib. I also just realized when I went to reach over and clean my nib that I forgot to put my reading glasses on. That would explain why I was catching myself hunching over and squinting at it like, what am I doing? I can't see. Okay, so I'm going to go in and build up some of these tones. There's not a ton of backgrounds on this page, so maybe in the hour we'll be able to get to brush work, but I'm not going to make any promises as of yet. Gah. Go, just a little bit of extra shadow on the edges of this little alcove so that it recedes from the rest of the wall. And remember to keep those lines on the side of the alcove in my perspective grid here, which you can see in the red and pink lines, which will also all get deleted when I bring it into Photoshop. Scan it in. Just not a really heavy coverage, just a little bit of a tone on these walls so they're not bright white. A little extra down in the corner here to kind of drive that corner back. Ooh, if my pen nib would cooperate. Sticklet page. Yeah, I definitely need to look through my supply and see if I think I have a backup. Whoop. The only thing is, I actually really don't like brand new nibs. They're like too sharp. And I find that I'm constantly, even with as light a touch as I try to have, I'm constantly like gouging holes in my board and getting them all filled with fibers, and then they're just as frustrating as the old crusty nibs. It's like there has to be this, they have to be in this like perfect spot right in the middle of broken in but not worn out yet, where they're really great to use, and the rest of the time you're just like, why are you so frustrating? All right, let me check my other page. Yeah, okay. Just checking on to make sure that the scene is consistent. I was just checking the other page that I had already completed the inking on to make sure that this floor texture is going to go in the right direction. And it is kind of just like this, just to make it kind of like a rough stone floor. Again, keeping that texture and that tone in perspective. So it's going in this direction, so it's got to follow this set of perspective lines and try to keep as close to staying in perspective as possible all the way across. Because if you come out of perspective, if it wobbles out of perspective, then it's not going to look like it's a texture on the floor anymore. It's just going to look like a bunch of weird, messy lines that don't belong anywhere. I'm going to break the illusion of perspective, basically. Oh my God, what is this giant, nasty hair stuck to my nib? No, get out of here. I'm going to blame the cat for that one. All right, there we go. Continuing to make progress here. And so occasionally, if I have like a very severe kind of perspective I need to keep to, and I have other things that might try to throw me off, like the curve in that wall, I'll just make myself some little guidelines that I can use to anchor the rest of the texture while I'm making it. Because otherwise, in that wide open space or real close to the wall, it's real easy to get thrown off and lose the grid. Or for your hand to just kind of drift. right, let's have that filled in. And there we go. Okay, just a couple more things in this panel that I like to pick out with the nib, even though I'm done with the background. Really tiny details, fine and tiny details on characters I'll pick out with the nib. So like the chain on the Heart of Nora that Wen is wearing. The geometric stuff sometimes too I'll like to pick out. The Nora emblem on the priestess's headdress. It's a little bit of tone difference there. Yep, that's it on this one. All right, next panel. So we've got backgrounds on 2 panels done. It's been about 20 minutes, making pretty good time. Speaking of picking out details on figures, so I do a lot of Drake in nib. Lose it all with the brush later. Because he's a black cat, so it's really easy to just accidentally turn him into a giant black featureless blob. Which would probably be fine if he were even more cartoony than he is, but he's not quite cartoony enough for that to work. All right, so yeah, basically just anywhere where I have to like pick out features on him, anywhere where like limb overlap, and we want to be able to tell that like, oh, that's the hind leg in front of the foreleg, or that's the line of his shoulder blades, or that sort of thing. Just to give him a little bit of definition. All right, back to dots. Yay, dots. Paper is bouncing a little bit. So hold it still. Oh, the tiny dots. So yeah, this is the second page of chapter 23, the last page of chapter 22, just posted to the public last night. My patrons got to see it last week. And so today they got just the chapter head image for the next chapter, which is what the public will get next week. And then we're going to start seeing these pages. So this page will be online for everybody in a couple more weeks, like 3 weeks, and online for my patrons in about 2 weeks. And I should have it done like today. So mostly during this stream. Even if I don't get to the brush inking during the stream, it almost always takes me less time than the background work, with rare exception. Usually the nib is just a lot slower and the brush goes a lot faster. Got that little full moon motif going in here again. Just a little bit more depth on the side of those little moons. More dots, more dots. Whoops. Let's come back down into frame where people can actually see what I'm doing. More of those carvings. Use a little bit of the stippling to add some depth, but again, I just want them on the in the background, kind of blending in. I don't really want to draw too much attention to them. So we're not going to go too overboard there. Dots, dots, dots. Let me check something on my other page. Yeah, that means line right there. I thought so. Okay, dots didn't take too long on that one. Now we got to start doing the lines. Dots and lines. Most of the backgrounds are. Nib, why? Why you gotta be like that? All right. Here we go. Same kind of thing where I'm trying to make the alcove a little bit darker than I'm going to make the rest of the area around it so that it pushes it back a little bit. But I don't want it dark, dark. Oh, sorry. I banged into the camera. My apologies. Making it shake. Shadow from Drake's butt and tail hanging over the edge there. All right. And again, he's sitting in the window. It's night out. That's just going to be black. That's what that little X means. That's to remind myself when I come back in later to fill it in with black. Some more of these tones in here. So that panel is pretty simple. All right, on to the next background. So it's dark outside the windows. Drake, I'm gonna have to do a little bit of work here. I'm actually gonna end up filling in a lot of this just with my pen because it's easier than coming in and coming back and trying to do it with brush later when it's so fine. Because that's pretty tiny. Pretty tiny kitty details there. There we go. So there's Drake jumping down from the windowsill. And now I will have to be very careful around him because he has a very wet, dark pool of ink that I do not want to accidentally drag my hand through. He's going to take a minute to dry. Got some more of this wall carving going on here. All right, more dots. More little circle motifs. Okay, and that's it for the walls. This is mostly floor. This whole panel is mostly floor. All right, hang on. I gotta turn this around. Come on, Nib. Why you gotta be like that? It's doing that thing where it's like, I know you're full of ink, but you just refuse to give it to me. And I mentioned when I was drawing this one, that this particular panel, that I kind of fudged a 3-point perspective type look in this room without actually doing a 3-point perspective. So I'm going to make sure that the walls are still following that kind of drawing down to a point. There we go. Oh, I gotta spin around again so I can get the angle I need for this. There we go. Sorry, I keep on spinning the page around trying to get the best angle to make the marks I'm trying to make. And from an outside perspective, that can be a little bit dizzying. Okay. So, again, the floor is going to be going this way. So we'll make our little guidelines along that perspective grid, which you can see in the pink lines there. There we go. Little shadow where Drake's jumping down. It has not yet hit the floor. Getting there, slowly building up this tone to make the floor this kind of dark gray, kind of rough stone texture. A little bit of a shadow under Wen, where she's walking. A little bit of a shadow in this alcove. Slowly fill in the middle. I say slowly. It's not moving that slowly. It's not bad. It's not that big of a panel, so it goes pretty quickly. She has a little shadow under the priestess's hand. She's steadying herself, heading down the stairs. Oh, and we've got a floor on the other side of the staircase here. Still need the texture. And then we just gotta do the staircase, which will only take a second. Where we're gonna once again use the direction of the pen strokes in building these tones and textures to also reinforce the different planes of these objects. So having them go in a different direction helps to keep that illusion of 3 dimensions. So we'll do a top step going in that direction, following the same perspective lines as the rest of the floor. The rise of the stairs going up and down for texture. And this just helps reinforce where the different, like which part of the objects you're looking at. And that will be dark, black. Okay. So that's that. We've got backgrounds on 4 of our 6 panels. We're 46 minutes into the stream. I usually like to keep the streams to about an hour long, so we'll see where we end up when I'm done doing the background on this bottom tier here, because I don't know, this might take a second, because let's see. Now, bottom tier I did a little bit differently, where this is a little inset panel. There's not really any background work or anything I need to do on that one. It's all going to be brush. It's just a close-up. So this is actually going to be black behind them, where we are looking in from the outside. Get these little details done here. A little more detail on Drake's face than last time, since he's a little closer. Which always looks it always looks really goofy at this stage. Like, what is happening with this character's face? Once it's all filled in black around it, though, it comes together. It just looks really silly at this stage. All right. That's what's going on with the characters. Whoa. Let's see how much of this background business we can get through. So from a distance, I had the outside of the buildings all just be dots too, but since this is more of a up close view, we're going to give it a little bit more of my stone texture. Where presumably the outside walls are a little bit rougher than the inside walls. See how much of this I get through in the last 10 minutes or so. This is kind of a labor-intensive texture to do. To basically fill this whole space with, because I foolishly left all this space for myself to fill up. I'm not sure if I'll do it the whole way. I haven't really decided what kind of call I'm going to make there. I may not do it all the way across, because that's just kind of unnecessary. That was very close to being dangerous. His face was mostly dry, though. I felt it stick. Still tacky. Hand stuck for a second, and I was like, no! right. So, I mean, I'm not sure what it was called. Smear. Yeah. Yep, exactly. White ink time. Drag your hand through wet ink, and then it's time to break out the whiteout. I use white gouache for my whiteout. I have some here. Yeah, so I use the Winsor & Newton permanent white gouache as my whiteout because it's really nice and opaque. And it's got a nice texture to it. It's water-based, so it doesn't, not all, I mean, it's a little stinky. Gouache is a little stinky, but a lot of the white inks I just couldn't stand. A lot of the white inks were really shellacky that I tried, and I really did not like working with them. They were just a little bit too sticky. So I like the white gouache. Sometimes you need, depending on how thick you mix it, sometimes you need a second coat just to really get the coverage, but a lot of times the places where I accidentally smear ink, it's not going to end up white anyway. It's smeared into an area like this where I'm going to end up building a texture back up anyway. So I don't need it completely paper white clean. I just need it not a giant black blob. So I'm going a little bit past the border here so that when this is reproduced, it can be a bleed, or, as close to an actual bleed as possible, but have it extend past the border considerably. Let's see where we end up. Let's see. We're about 55 minutes in now. So, it's time to do the thing where I tell you about all the things. Got to tell you about all the things. So this is for my webcomic, Age of Night. You can check it out at ageofnight.com. That's spelled NIGHT, like the time of day. I update every Wednesday, so a new comic page just went up last night. Another one will go up next week, and so on and so forth. And you can also support me on Patreon. So that's patreon.com/ageofnight. And everybody who supports me on Patreon gets to see the comic pages a week in advance. So you'll always be 1 week ahead of wherever everybody else is. Plus, you get to see lots of other cool stuff, everybody $2 and up gets to see pencils. You get to see other cool process videos and stuff first. And right now I'm working on a comic pitch project completely separate from this that I'm updating. As I'm working on it, I'm updating on Patreon and letting everybody kind of get a peek into what goes into making a comic pitch process, which is pretty cool. You can find me on Twitter at Age of Night. You can find me on Instagram at Amanda Call Art. That's just my name with ART at the end of it. And if you want to watch me draw, I try to do this kind of live art stream about once a week. Every once in a while, I upload other more edited and edited and put together process videos. So you can always follow this YouTube channel. If you subscribe to it and then hit the little bell thingy, it'll tell you when I go live on your desktop or on your phone or whatever, wherever you have it set up to do that. Which I apologize, they're not at more regular times, but it's kind of just the time that art streams happen is the time that I have a chance to do them. It's kind of how it works. All right, I still haven't made up my mind on how far I want this to go, so I'm kind of just going to leave it there for, kind of leave it trailing off there for right now until I make up my mind. I might have to walk away and look at it for after a few minutes. Not because I Not because I don't want to do the texture over here. I'm not like averse to having to do the work. I'm just not sure that it's really the best call for the page. Like if it does the most for the page, if it really works for the composition for the whole thing. Because I've got a lot of gray tone coverage going on around here, and I did not just do that. Yep. It's time for the white ink fill. Good God, my pen just splattered everywhere. What a mess. Okay. Yeah, that's the universe telling me it's time to do the end of that. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess I'm gonna have some quality time with the white gouache at the end of this, since I just splattered ink everywhere. Goodness gracious. Try to get out some of those big globs before they dry as little beads. Cool. Okay. Well, that was going really well up until that point. Okay, so this was chapter 23, page 2 of Age of Night. I started with just a handful of lines on here on a penciled page, and now I've got most of the background work done. I've not quite done with this one down here. Still have to do brush figure work on this one, but we got pretty far in this hour, so oh no. Yep. Yeah, great way to start your day, getting ink all over your page. All right, well, thank you everybody for hanging out, and I will see you all next time.